Good morning, and welcome to Good Morning Tobago right here on Tobago Updates. Guys, I had to bring a little sunshine, especially seeing that it's a bit wet and rainy outside this morning. But this morning, when you see me sitting here, we're having those conversations that you want to have to get your morning started, and I'm asking the questions that you want to know. Now, before we kick off our conversations this morning, because there's a lot happening, especially on the political front here on the island of Tobago, we're going to start off with your news in 90 seconds. Now, the former deputy political leader of the PDP, Kizal Jackson, sent best wishes to the newly formed Tobago People's Party. The TPP is being led by in the interim by Chief Secretary Farley Augustine after he and others broke away from the PDP. In a video posted to social media, Jackson cautioned Augustine to remember that even though he was under a new political banner, he still had a mandate to deliver to Tobagonians. She also stated that inexperience in governance is no excuse for mistakes and encouraged him to do better for the people. Additionally, President of the All Tobago Fisher Folk Association, Curtis Douglas, said he is willing to sit down with the Barbadian authorities to find a solution for the flying fish debacle. Last week, Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, announced that meetings would be arranged between the Fisheries Department of Barbados and Trinidad and Tobago after the All Tobago Fisher Folk Association called for government intervention into claims of Bajan overfishing in Tobago waters. While neither the All Tobago Fisher Folk Association nor the Fisheries Division possesses data to support these claims, Douglas said the daily experiences of Tobagonian fishermen is enough for a case to be presented to the authorities. And finally, opposition MP Danish Rambly claimed that the proclamation of the 2015 procurement legislation was a conman job. He accused it of being a watered-down bill that does not ensure the full transparency and accountability that many sectors in this country is expecting. According to Rambly, critical areas of procurement were removed from the amendments, such as legal debt financing, accounting, auditing, and medical services. He also added that even with full proclamation, there was a delay in the appointment of a new regulator. And that was your news in 90 seconds. Guys, this morning we're going to start off the conversation, as I said before, talking a bit about what's happening on the political front here in Tobago. Now, things have continued to evolve, and over the last couple of days, we saw the Prime Minister making an intervention there on his Facebook page where he came out and he would have basically commented on everything that's going on in Tobago and called for the Chief Secretary to call an election in Tobago. And we have a number of opinions out there in this space in regards to this. Some persons feeling like he doesn't have the authority to do so, which we know legally he does not. But he has called on Chief Secretary Farley Augustine to make such a decision. Now, many such calls are being made in Trinidad as well for Dr. Kido Rowley to call a general election as well. So I guess we see two sides of the coin happening there at the central government level. We see the opposition calling for Dr. Keith Rowley to call for a general election. And we see Dr. Rowley calling here in Tobago for the Chief Secretary to make an intervention and call for another THA election in light of the new formation of the Tobago People's Party. And to have this conversation with me this morning, I have the pleasure of speaking with Mr. Ashworth Jack, and he is on with us virtually. And he's the former minority leader of the Tobago House of Assembly. Good morning, Mr. Jack, and how are you?
Good morning, and good morning, Tobago. Good morning, everyone who is viewing us on the World Wide Web, and thank you very much for having me.
Well, it's always a pleasure to have you here on Tobago Updates to join us and have these discussions. Now, there's a lot happening on the political front. I mean, from the sitting last Thursday, a lot came out from that, with Mr. Morris coming out even in the middle of the sitting during his presentation and saying, if you name man, call elections now. And we see that evolving to Mr. Watson, you going live on Facebook on Sunday, calling for the Prime Minister to man up and intervene where the Tobago House of Assembly is concerned, and the Prime Minister, with a prompt response, some may say, or some may say it was just coincidental, of the timing within which he would have posted his statement on Facebook. Now, I want to allow you first to give your overall comments on everything that's happening, and then we'll get into a number of the issues.
You know, it is said that the more things change, the more they remain the same. What are you seeing happening, playing out in the political space today is not surprising and it's not new. Uh, Tobago has been the political football of this country for as long as we could remember. The Tobago House of Assembly Act number 40 of 1996 kind of brought a bit of stability. But of course, ever so often, the, if the political leaders in Trinidad aren't incongruent with the political leaders in Tobago, you will find some of this happening. And that is why it is so important for the issue of constitutional reform to give Tobago its full autonomy is so important. And so when you see some of the things, and I want to caution political leaders uh, who always, every time they're not getting their own way, asks the government in trying to intervene in Tobago's business, and at the same time asks for autonomy. It's an oxymoron. You can't have both of them happening at the same time. It's either you want autonomy, and autonomy has something that the THA have to practice, that when it comes, they are accustomed to it. And so you're hearing some of this stuff, and it's interesting. And I'm quite sure as we go along, we're going to kind of define some of the things that you're
Right.
hearing
So,
and
and it's
make some.
interesting that you would have mentioned the oxymoron of asking for self governance as well as asking for an intervention from the central government, because this was something that I would have highlighted recently, in relation to the contradiction with Mr. Watson Duke in him previously asking the central government to stay out of Tobago business and allowing Tobagoans to manage the affairs of Tobago, but then on the other hand, coming out to ask the Prime Minister to make an intervention. One of the things that I want to highlight is the fact that the Prime Minister would have said, if you do not call an election, we would not be taking you guys seriously. But can we interpret this as him saying Tobago would be on the back burner? He would not be taking Tobago's affairs seriously unless there is an election being called and there is a legitimate party that is running the THA.
Parties don't run the THA. That's the first thing. Parties don't run the THA. The Tobago House of Assembly Act does not recognize parties. Individuals run the THA based on how the act is set up. One, two, and I will get back to that. But let me start by saying I find the Prime Minister, it's interesting the Prime Minister will threaten the Tobago House of Assembly executive, and by extension the people of Tobago, saying it's either do what I say or else. That is not how a democracy works. A democracy works where the elected people are allowed to do what the people elect them to do. And the next election, the people judge them. The people are their bosses. They decide if they want to continue to hire them or they want to fire them. It can't be that because you all are not seeing eye to eye on something that you, as the head of the government of Trinidad and Tobago, threaten the island government of Tobago and say, we ain't going to take you seriously. I don't think people understand that there are only two executive bodies that run the government of Trinidad and Tobago. The cabinet two, is one executive body, and the executive council of the Tobago House of Assembly. They are the only two executive bodies that run government. Everybody else has a committee in terms of the county council and stuff like that. And then there's a certain amount of leeway that goes with that. I mean, it's an imperfect act. And but the act still gives us a lot of leeway. And as Tobagonians, we have to fight tooth and nail to make sure that no one infringes on that. Because at the same time, you're looking to increase your responsibility to the people of Tobago. The issue of saying that you all came in on one political platform and now you have another is not the business of any one of any political organization in the case of Tobago. People speak about morality, and I think maybe the former Prime Minister, Mr. Pandey, had some stuff right when he said politics have a morality of its own, because we were just pointing out the oxymorons a while ago. I remember the Prime Minister making a statement some time back that I would keep out of Tobago people business. I
Right.
didn't say that. He said that. He
Right.
said that.
He
He
did
said
in a
Tobago have a
previous statement on one of
yes,
those political
that Tobago,
platforms
right,
indicate that
that Tobago
he
executives run
is
it.
limited by the law to not intervene on a number of matters regarding the Tobago House of Assembly. But a lot of people might argue this is not necessarily an intervention, but a call for Fali to make the intervention
Well,
through calling
the
the election.
intervention part is where the Prime Minister was said, if you want to be taken seriously, this is the Prime Minister of the country. And when he said, if you want to be taken seriously, I would interpret that as a threat. That there are things that we will not do because you have not done what we want you to do. But at the same time, I think as you said earlier, in the Trinidad space, there's a lot of calls for the Prime Minister to call election in Trinidad. But more so, the government would have postponed the local government election that was due. And so if any election is due in Trinidad and Tobago, it's the local government election.
Correct.
But it seems as every time there's a disagreement, somebody try to put Tobago in their place. And Tobagonians, this has nothing to do with your political organization. This has to do with your principle and your fight for freedom in terms of government. We have to stand up and say, listen, we will not allow anyone to dictate the pace of Tobago and Tobago, regardless of your political organization. And then the question is, if the Prime Minister was of a different political organization and the Chief Secretary in Tobago was of the PNM, and the Prime Minister in Trinidad would have said what the Chief Secretary had said to the Chief Secretary, listen, you need to do this, or else you didn't take it seriously. Or what would have been the position of the organization? What would have been the position? But then again, we have to remember that this is the same Prime Minister who told our Chief Secretary to sit down. So it speaks to how the office of Chief Secretary is viewed. And in Tobago, we have to, because we have to surround the office of Chief Secretary, not necessarily the individual, but the office of Chief Secretary, because that is the highest office in the Tobago space.
Right.
And we have to
And
ask ourselves,
in in
let me
this
just finish
whole
this.
discussion and everything that's happening, especially with the comments that have been made by the prime minister, which seems to be um, another framing of his statements during the campaign period, where he said that Tobago people would feel it in essence if they were to
I wouldn't
vote for
forgive.
another
If you don't
political
vote, I wouldn't
party,
forgive her. Yeah.
right?
If you didn't
But
vote for us, we wouldn't forgive you.
we would not forgive you, right? But
Yeah.
tell us, what do you think the role of those two Tobago representatives in the parliament are at this time, especially with the comments being made by the prime minister?
You have to understand that the two representatives of Tobago are also either in the cabinet or in the executive. And therefore, you don't expect, I don't think it's a legitimate expectation to have anything else but a doubling down on the prime minister's position. You have to understand that what we operate in this country is a constitutional dictatorship where a prime minister is elected or a political leader is on in the opinion of the president, the person who commands the majority of seats in the parliament is appointed prime minister. The Prime Minister then appoints everyone else and fires everyone else at his discretion, or as some people say, that is women fancy. Once the Prime Minister is appointed and he takes an oath of office, you have a constitutional dictatorship where one person dictates what everything else. And so, could you imagine the Prime Minister having such a strong position on on Tobago in terms of what should happen in terms of the THA, and one of his MPs, who he have appointed minister, go against him? That will be the last day. Politicians don't have union. You have no way to fight here. The Prime Minister is the total authority on who sits in his cabinet and who serves on his executive. So it would not be prudent to expect anything else but a doubling down. It calls for a certain kind of independence to say, I don't care what I lose, to stand up in a certain position. And I don't expect that. I really don't.
But does this alter the perspective of Tobagonians on the impact or the influence of the representatives that we have in Trinidad? Because we would expect, or at least hope, that one of them would come out and say, okay, regardless of us not agreeing with the current political circumstance, there should never be a reason for Tobagonians financially, economically, or socially to have to really suffer the brunt of the political fracture that's happening between the two islands.
Again, it calls for a certain kind of strength to do things like that. It have to be people who don't think that they have anything to lose or don't mind losing political office. And for so many people, political office, once they get it, that's the greatest thing that ever happened to them. And this is not only in the case of the MPs, that this is a kind of across the board when you look at Caribbean politics. And so to put yourself out on a limb, to give that up, like something else. You know, I never became a minister. I turned down being a minister on nothing less than 3 or 4 occasions. Because my position was, my boss will fire me. They would have made me a senator and then a minister. Both positions are the women fancy of the Prime Minister. And so therefore, you better toe the line, or you have to resign, or I have to fire you.
Right.
And so that is one of the drawbacks, that I took a decision. I am not going to do this because I want to be free to have certain kinds of discussion with the Prime Minister or with the government.
Okay, and before you go, tell us, what do you think the role of Tobago civil society is at this moment in regards to everything that has been happening?
In the absence of opposition on both sides, the Tobago civil society have an awesome responsibility. Like any other country, the civil societies in any countries, NGOs and civil societies have a responsibility to do some checks and balances to keep both the Tobago House of Assembly in check and the central government in check. It's not that they should only keep the central government in check, they have to also keep the Tobago House of Assembly in check. And because they're supposed to, quote unquote, represent a great part of civil society, one would expect their voice to have some teeth. But I don't know if that is so. But this is a troubling situation. It is a troubling situation because there are a number of things that still take place in Trinidad as far as the Tobago's development is concerned. Because I think a lot of this, even when you look at what happened with the EMA, and of course you've seen some of the comments, because sometimes you have to be careful if you have glass house, you can't throw stone. But you see what happened with all the comments you've seen about the EMA. I know that there are a number of licenses, things that like the blasting license for the study park quarry, the mining license, the export license, because earlier this year there have been a denial of an export license to the study park quarry, although we're talking about lack of foreign exchange. And the study park quarry is poised to bring a lot of foreign exchange because of the demand for its product in Central America, especially in Guyana. But yet the quarry doesn't have a license to export because that is not in the purview of the Tobago House of Assembly. So you can well find things like that being held up and stymieing the development of Tobago because of the quarry. But nobody should be surprised at this. You have to understand that the two Tobago seats is integral to the forming of government in Trinidad. Look at it for the probably last 20 or so years. The two Tobago seat is integral, and therefore the Prime Minister, as the head of his political organization, is going to position himself and his political organization in what.
Okay, sorry to that we lost Mr. Jack a bit there to his connection. But we're gonna go ahead and move swiftly on to our next conversation. But we're gonna take a quick break and we'll be back really soon.
Hey, Tobago updates. Na 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 na.